Okay, so the second image that we are going to look at in ancient Egypt is from the Old Kingdom, and they are the Great Pyramids of Giza. So the Old Kingdom is running from 2575 to 2150 BCE. And this is truly like a time of like stability if you think of like the Golden Age or high points in Greek culture like the classical period. It's basically like the time that Egypt was truly thriving. And there's a lot of wealth in the families, which is why these elaborate tombs were being built. And you need to know that the three pyramids are a representative for King Khufu, King Khafre, and King Menkaure. So King Khufu is like the head honcho. He's the first generation, and his pyramid is the largest. Then the second largest, the middle one, is Khafre, who is Khufu's son, and then the smallest pyramid belongs to Menkaure, who is Khufu's grandson, so Khafre's son. It's made out of limestone and granite, and most of the granite, well, no, I think all of the granite is gone now because they took it like in the 800s, 1000 to face mosques with, and it happened on the Colosseum as well. So the Colosseum was like covered in marble, and they took it off to build St. Peter's Basilica, I believe. So, and I think the pyramids are like the most recognizable image that we have in association with ancient Egypt. So let's just let's talk about Khufu first. So it's the largest pyramid, and it's the original pyramid, and it was basically an architectural structure that was based off of Khufu's father, and it was supposed to represent the stability of Egypt, and they could spend money on this big pyramid. And I think it's interesting because when they started building Khufu's pyramid, and they had these long, like, almost aisleways, like if you think of Stonehenge, how I told you they had these like long processionals, they kind of had the same thing. When they were building these runways that led to the pyramids, which these runways could have been built to help actually move the supplies to the pyramid. So, but when they were building Khufu's, there was this huge piece of sandstone that they couldn't move because it was too big. Well, they didn't want to move it, and they didn't really know what to do with it. And that's where the Sphinx actually came from. So they were making this causeway, and they had this huge sandstone, and it's actually they didn't want to move it, so they kind of like problem solved and made the Sphinx. And the Sphinx, there's been geologists that said that this was actually built later, and there was evidence of water, so it had to have been built later. That's not true. Like, this was built at the same time in the pyramids. The Sphinx is basically an elegant solution to their problem. The head is the head of a man. The head of a man is supposed to represent intelligence, and the body is the body of a lion. And we know that we saw even in the Narmer palette, the lion pops up a lot. It's supposed to represent strength. So, and the headband that he wears, which is a headband that only kings are to wear, is called a caut, C-A-U-T. It ties up into a cobra's tail in the back. And a cobra is another symbol in ancient Egyptian art that means strength and power. So going back to the pyramids, one other thing I wanted to say about the Sphinx is, I don't know if any of you guys ever read Oedipus the King, and in the book he comes to the Sphinx, and the Sphinx asks him the riddle, like, what walks on 4 legs at the beginning of their life, 3 legs, or 2 legs in the middle, and 3 legs at the end? And the answer is human, man. So I think the Sphinx has this like long association throughout different cultures. You can actually see these from the city of Giza. And in Cairo, like currently, it's so overpopulated. There are people living in tombs. And I think they've actually even run like power. These pyramids cover 13.5 acres. They discovered, I'm not sure when they discovered it, but they discovered a boat that was buried close to the tomb of Khufu, and it was a life-size boat, and apparently it was like part of their burial process. It would have been used to like place his body on, and they would have like floated him from one side of the Nile to the other. It must have been, like I said, part of the burial process, and that was all it was used for. There was no evidence that it was used for anything else. So let's talk a little bit about the construction of pyramids, because I think there's a lot of misinformation or speculation about how these were actually built. And a lot of people, the first reaction they have is that, oh, they were built from slaves, and that's not accurate. They were not built by slaves. Actually, the people who built the pyramids were extremely well taken care of. They had villages that they found close to the pyramids where there were evidence of like good medical attention. They were fed well. And if you think about like what I talked about when we first started talking about Egypt, they lived by the Nile, and I said the Nile would flood every few years. And when the Nile would flood, like people had nothing to do, so they would build these pyramids, and that's probably when they created most of their artworks. It was like a downtime, if you will. So it is, and I should point this out, this is an architectural marvel, but this is not a technological marvel. There's nothing real complicated about this. And the way they think that they set the foundation is they would dig like little trenches to kind of basically start out the foundation, if you will, and they would fill these trenches with water, and if the water would overflow, then they knew they needed to level it some. So that's like really how it was like the old way of leveling things. So that's why these are in such perfect triangular composition. And I think they're like something ridiculous, like 1/4 of an inch off or something. I don't know. There's all these stones that were used to build this were locally found. They were in a quarry that was very close. So it's not like Stonehenge where they bring these huge blue stones from Wales. It was all very local material. And I think you all know that these were actually the tombs of these 3 dead kings. So pretty elaborate for a burial space. I think they spent more time concerned with their dead than they did the living. Teams would be transporting these stones by sheer muscle power. There was like a thought that maybe they rolled the stones on logs and just kept moving the back log to the front. And like I said, everything had to be absolutely level, so I told you how they believe that they leveled these. So it's just absolutely, like, definitely the iconography of ancient Egypt. So we talked about the Great Sphinx, and now we're going to talk about King Menkaure and a queen. And Menkaure's, remember, was the smallest pyramid at Giza. He was the grandson of Khufu. And this was actually found in the Valley Temple, and the Valley Temple would have been a bit of a distance from the pyramids. And the pyramids weren't just the pyramids. Like, there was temples there, and there were smaller pyramids, and then they had this Valley Temple, and the Valley Temple was actually built for all these kings who died. It was basically a place, an active place to worship deceased kings. And this sculpture was found there, and it's made out of greywacke. And if you remember, the Ambum stone is made out of greywacke too, from Papua New Guinea. So I don't know if that has any connection at all, but I just think it's interesting that they're made out of the same stone. This would have represented the mark of physical ideal at this point in time. And you'll see this in Greece too. So they will construct not the lightliness of these people, but what they project, what beauty meant. You know, he's very strong, he's very poised, his wife is by his side, you know, and the way she is grasping him represents that she's in support of him. Very rigid, which is a typical Egyptian quality of art. Or maybe you could even say it was convection. The foot is going forward, like he's moving forward. He is clenched, and, you know, but they don't look miserable. Like, they're kind of smiling, they're kind of happy. And I think that it's important to note, too, that there were traces of red and black paint. I think when we look at this ancient stuff, we always assume that it was just the stone, or it was just the marble. If you look at the Parthenon in Greece, the whole thing was painted at one point, which just kind of, it's hard to wrap your head around that because you're so used to seeing these images just completely plain and solid, so it's hard to imagine them being painted. And to look at some like Photoshop images where they would have like showed how they would have been painted, it's kind of funny. Okay, and the last image we're going to look at is the seated scribe. Before I run out of time, then I'm going to have to start another lecture. This was found near the tomb of Kai in the Sahara, and we're looking at the 5th dynasty, so 2450 to 2325 BCE. So we're still in the old dynasty. This is actually painted limestone, and I think this is cool because we get to see what it looks like painted. And he's important because do you see how he doesn't have this ideal body type? He's a little flabby. Scribes would have been high-ranking people that were basically appointed to study and to document things. And I think it speaks a lot of their culture that they would have bothered making a sculpture of this person. Even though he's high-ranking, which in most cultures, high-ranking people have some type of imagery. But I think it's important to note that, like, they did not make him idealized like they would the king. And there's no guarantee that the kings look the way that they did, because let's face it, it's not like the kings were going into battle. Their soldiers were doing that for them. So I don't really believe that the kings looked the way that they did. These Old Kingdom sculptures produced these less prominent people, which, so in the Old Kingdom, they made a lot of these, and it's rendered in a definitely relaxed, lifelike fashion. You have a very round head, an alert expression, and a close-cropped haircut. This was, like I said, discovered near a tomb, and it was a tomb of a government official, so it could have been a portrait of Kai himself. So they did, if you had money or if you were high-ranking, you could afford to have, obviously not like a pyramid, but you could have a little bit nicer of a burial. And their burial and after death was so important to them. This would have been a goal of people's, is to make enough money that you could have this nice burial. You can see the eye makeup under his eyes. And we have irregular contours of engaging face project, like a sense of individual likeliness. So it's the first time we're really seeing some, like being able to identify an actual person. So, and like I talked about his saggy body, he wouldn't have been a physical laborer. And the inscription that's on this is, "Become a scribe so that your limbs remain smooth and your hands soft, and you can wear white and walk like a man of standing who courtiers will greet." So, and this is just like a really important sculpture and it speaks a lot of the old dynasty or the Old Kingdom and how prosperous they were, because, you know, people could take on jobs like this.